According to the Republican budget that was passed, for example, we would have to eliminate transportation funding by a third. We'd have to cut transportation funding by a third. You remember when that bridge in Minnesota collapsed with all those people on it? And there was a big hue and cry, how can this happen in America? Well, the National Society of Engineers, they've looked around and they give us a D when it comes to infrastructure. The challenge with coal is that although it's very cheap, it's also dirty. And it can create the kinds of air pollution that not only is contributing to climate change, but it's also creating asthma for kids nearby. You got asthma. Okay. And so sucking that stuff in is not ideal.
The exact cause of asthma is not known. Joining me with reaction from the Fox Business Network, Sandra Smith, and Fox News contributor, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Monica Crowley. All right, we've got to get to the point where we've got to be honest here. When the president says that the Ryan budget is causing old people to fend for themselves, that's a lie. When he says it will cause kids with autism and Down syndrome to fend for themselves, that is a lie. The bridge collapse had nothing to do with infrastructure. It was a design flaw that they discovered. Everybody apparently knows that but him. The same with coal and asthma. Right. These are not true. These are false statements.
And it's about time that we recognize that the president has been lying to us. And it's not just the examples that you laid out, Sean, but even bigger things like he promised that he would cut the deficit in his first couple of years in office. And he has tripled it, almost quadrupled the deficit. There are very serious issues going on in this country. And what we see the president and the Democrats do is resort back to these old school attacks on Republicans, saying they want to throw grandma in the snow. They want to have grandpa eating cat food. They're responsible for cars flying off of bridges and bridges collapsing. This kind of stuff may have worked back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s. That kind of demagoguery may have worked, but the political reality is different this time, and the fiscal reality is this time, and they're not working anymore.
Probably worked in the 90s is the last time when the Republicans were going to increase Medicare 7% a year for 7 years, and that was viewed as a cut. Sarah, look, is this a sign of desperation?
Reeks of desperation.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the bridge point, I mean, there's over 500 bridges in this country that are at the tail end of their life expectancy, but he is pointing the finger right back at himself in his own fiscal policy. We're going to be in no condition, whether it's now or in the next 10 years, based on his policies, his fiscal policy, to do anything about infrastructure in this country if we continue to spend like we are doing today. He pointed the finger right back at himself. This is his and his administration's problem.
Well, it's interesting because we also, you follow business. Yeah. When the S&P comes out, now we learned that they were lobbying them.
They were trying to convince Standard & Poor's to not release this downgrade of
the S&P. And now they're demonizing him.
And now they're demonizing him. That's exactly right. They begged for weeks, we learned today, and this was confirmed by the White House, that they begged S&P not to release that rating or the outlook downgrade for our coveted AAA rating. Guess what? Any other country that's running $14 trillion deficit, they're gonna be downgraded. Why aren't we? I mean, this country, God forbid, should be downgraded running that kind of debt.
Let's go back to the rhetoric, because you follow politics, you follow business a little bit more, so we'll go back and forth here. But on the rhetoric side, is it that he thinks this whole playbook will work? Does he think that the class warfare will work? Does he think that, you know, the 47% of Americans don't pay taxes, that they'll say, yeah, we want those rich people to pay more?
Okay, so Sean, when you lay out all of these rhetorical examples about what Obama is doing, what he's saying to the American people, how he's smearing the Republican Party, there are two options here, right? There are two possible reasons for this. Either A, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or B, he's deliberately misleading the American people. Either one is not comforting, right? Either one is not comforting. But I think that we have seen a serious pattern here from this man from the time he announced for president through this very day of engaging in class warfare and deliberate mistruths to the American people. In fact, yesterday he was on the campaign trail and he actually said this, Sean. He said, we can't just tell the wealthiest among us, you don't have to do a thing. You just sit there and relax. Now, if that's not the most outrageous form of class warfare we have heard yet from this man, I can't think of anything else.
The point is, back to the economic side, is that, you know, the top 1% pay 40% of the bill. You got the top 10% paying 85% of the bill.
So this just goes back to the constant lies that we're seeing, and I've been calling it scapegoating. I mean, another thing that we've been looking at is oil and gas prices. Oil closed at another multi-year 5-year high today. We look back at what's happened since the president took office. Gas prices have doubled since that day. He is using a scapegoat now. He's pointing to speculators for driving up the price. No, it's your fiscal policy and the devaluing of the U.S. dollar that's continuing to push up oil prices and the price of everything else.
And of course, now he goes out even coal, because we can't drill, we can't build nuclear facilities, refineries, we can't expand coal mining, all the resources we have, or natural gas. But there's a more sinister side to this, because when he's lying, he's the president of the United States. And if he's misleading, use whatever term you want or adjective you want, the people that are going to get scared are the old people that he says are going to have to fend for themselves, or the parents with children with autism or Down syndrome, or people that have asthma. Basically are being told, hey, those evil Republicans, they want to expand coal mining so your asthma is going to get worse.
And here's why this is particularly appalling, because not only is it a bunch of lies that they're spinning to the American people to keep their big government welfare state in place and going, but it damages the Obama brand, because remember back in 2007, 2008, this was the guy who was going to change the political tone. He was going to change the rhetoric. He was hope and change.
That was another promise.
Now he is running strictly on fear-mongering. And isn't it ironic that after 8 years, when the left plastered President Bush for being a fear-monger, for, scaring people over threats that actually did exist, now you've got the hope and change guy scaring people on threats that do not.
But that just goes back to, why are these other candidates, and Trump's finally realizing you don't have to go on the offensive here with Obama. He can simply sit back and let everybody look at the situation that they are in today and where they were a couple years ago, and whether or not they feel like they're in a better place.
Are you better off?
Right.
Can we afford 4 more?
Right.
Which is,
and the difference this time around, Sean, is that Obama has to run on a record. He didn't have to in 2008. He has to now.